Okay.
Well, Mexico was America. Remember that. Mexico is now Mexico. We took away Texas from Mexico. We took away Colorado from Mexico. We took away part of Canada from Mexico. All of that was Mexico. So Mexico was larger than the present United States. The United States is only a few hundred years old. So the period we're talking about, Mexico meant America. Okay.
You know, I'm tempted to say, but
yes, yes. When I say we, I'm talking about
the nation states. Okay.
United States.
Let me, we have a question from the audience, comment? Okay. I guess you're learning all of this in high school, right? No.
Some of it.
So I know you haven't learned anything since you got here this morning, right? I'm just playing with you. Okay, go ahead. What do you... Oh, you want to stand up? Go ahead, stand up, sir. Please, sir.
We learned a little something about the hominids and the different ancient people. We had to do a research on it.
All right. Well, this should help you out with that research. Okay. Let's go to Egypt. Why is that civilization, Egyptian or Kemetic civilization, so important in world history?
Okay, the Egyptian thing, I have published 4 books on Egypt. Egypt Revisited, Egypt, Child of Africa, Great African Thinker, and one that is now discontinued, Nile Valley Civilization. It's not just my work. I have drawn upon the best from Europe, from Africa, from America, the Caribbean, etc. The reason why it is so important is because Egypt was the world's major civilization. Egypt gave us the first books in astronomy. Egypt gave us the day. For example, the 24-hour day. There's no such thing as a 24-hour day. In the Arctic, the day is 6 months, the night is 6 months. Some days are 18 hours. So there's no 24-hour day. It is the Africans in Egypt who decided on the 24-hour day. They also gave us the year. It is they who determined that the year would be 365 days. The Africans gave us the second of time. It is they who determined the second of time. They had gone very far. This is not true of all Africa, just like the major breakthroughs in Europe were not true of all Europe. You would have parts of Europe. For example, I lived in Europe for 10.5 years. And I didn't just live in Western Europe. I went behind the Iron Curtain. I spent a year behind the Iron Curtain. I went in villages in Europe where as much as 12 people used the same latrine pit. They did not have flush toilets. Okay, this is not true of all Europe. In Budapest, for example, the fine city of Budapest, Sopron, they had all the amenities you find in the West. But when I went into the villages, I found Europeans who were living just as I lived as a child in very small, poor villages. They did not have showers. I'm not saying this is true of all Europe. I'm telling you about specific parts of Europe. So that what we have been fed with, we go to small, poor parts of Africa and we think that is the African. But then we go to the best part of Europe and we think that is the European. If you really go to the dark parts of Europe, then you find out what is really going on. If you go to the richest parts of Africa, then you make a comparison. The reason why we always get these images about Africans and Europeans is because they always pick poorest in Africa and the best in Europe, without realizing that the Europe jumped because it was able to take the lands of America and was able to take the wealth of Africa. It had its own genius too, like other people. Everybody has genius, and it was able to build upon that, but it had great advantages as a result of those conquests. Now, the problem is this, that the image of the African has been built up on his lowest common denominator, and that's what I want to talk about. What we have discovered over the last 25 years in Africa is utterly astonishing. We found Africans had steel, were making steel 1,500 years ago. There's no question about it. It's in my book, Blacks in Science. It was done by American scientists. American scientists found Africans were producing steel along the lakes of Tanzania and Uganda 1,500 years ago. They found the actual machines. They found 13 of these machines. And they found that these Africans had introduced technologies that we did not know about in the world until the late 19th century. They were doing it in the 5th century. Along the lakes of Tanzania and Uganda, the Africans had machines that were producing steel at temperatures of 2,642 degrees Fahrenheit. No machine on earth ever achieved those temperatures until the late 19th, early 20th century. The Africans also were making steel in a single-stage process. Even when Europe started to make steel in the 19th century, Europe made steel in 2 crude processes. The Africans were doing it in 1. The Africans also were using less wood and charcoal, and that is what surprised us. Listen to this. We wanted to know, why would the Africans have to save on fuel when Africa was full of jungle? So we studied that. We discovered Africa has less jungle. Listen to this. United Nations report. Africa has less jungle than any other continent comparable with its land space. It doesn't have less jungle than any other continent. It has less jungle than any other continent comparable with land space. Africa is 1.5 times the size of Europe. We did not know that. We have been using the wrong maps for centuries. We have been using maps built on what is known as the Mercator projection. The new maps built on what is known as the Peterson projection shows that we mismeasured Africa. The new maps by NASA, the space agency, show that Africa is a lot larger than we thought it was. There are whole parts of Africa that have no jungle. The Mali Empire in Africa, which became the richest empire in the world in the 14th and 15th century, this empire was larger. The Arabs crossed it up and down. The Arabs tell us it was larger than all the states of Western Europe put together. It did not have 1 bit of jungle. These Africans were so afraid of the jungle that when they went to trade in the south with the Africans in the jungle, they would take goods of a certain value and put it in a clearing and retreat. And their brothers in the jungle would come and put something of equal value and retreat. So that I'm not dismissing the jungle because I grew up in the jungle. I spent the first 14 years of my life in the jungle.
The jungle today is called a resort area.
Well,